Hello, everybody. We're just going to have a general conversation about crisis situations. I'm here with my friend and therapist, Jennifer Cain, and we're going to talk about what are crisis situations and how best to deal with them. I'm sure a lot of people have dealt with crisis situations. And one of my themes is, does it seem like there are more and more, or is that just the field and the atmosphere and so forth? Are you getting a lot of crisis situations more so than just general practitioner consultation?
I get what you're saying. Yeah, I would say so because I think our world right now is in a state of crisis. After the COVID pandemic, everything is uncertain, and that is scary, right? And in those situations when we don't know what decisions are safe to make and best to make, we then go into our crisis response, our threat response system, our bodies, fight, freeze. And then we respond in those situations. And sometimes that's not the best response. So we interpret situations as a threat that really aren't necessarily threats because of the state of the world that we've been living in with all the uncertainty all around us. So I think we all suffering from some type of or have endured crisis, especially in the last 4 years or so.
Let me ask this. I want to give some examples of things that are crisis and compare them to things that are not crisis. And then I'd ask you to share what are exactly crisis situations.
Okay.
Somebody steals your car, is that a crisis?
Well, for sure. If you saying after, like you go outside and you see your car is gone,
Yeah.
well, I mean, it's traumatic. Right. But a crisis situation, it can be when you might have some financial difficulties and all those other things. Now, it's more of a crisis, I would say, if the person was like in the vehicle and they came and tried to steal the vehicle while they were in it. Right. So like afterwards, it is definitely a stressor. It definitely is unfair. But crisis, if you just go outside and you see your car gone,
Not
not necessarily
necessarily.
a situation, but you can respond in regards to your mental health crisis, right? Like your response to that event is a crisis based on your interpretation of that, but it's not a crisis situation. If that makes
So
sense.
it's all about how you respond and your basically your preparation for dealing with certain type of emergency. Do you have a little money in the bank? Do you have insurance? All of those particular things. What
Right.
about losing your job and they threaten to call the police on you for some malfeasance?
Now, I definitely think that that's a crisis situation, primarily because one, the state of our economy right now, right? Like everything is 1,000 times more expensive at this point. It's we're trying to figure out how to function, what deserves our finances, and then you lose your job, everything that allows you to be able to be so stable all of a sudden. Yeah, that's definitely a crisis situation. But again, it's also something that is threatening to your safety. So then that, and then how to move forward impacts your functioning, which usually will indicate a crisis response or move you towards a crisis response.
I got one that is very much dependent upon the person. Your girlfriend leaves you.
Oh, well, that's an emotional crisis, I'm quite sure. And it depends on hmm, maybe what the relationship was to you, what if y'all had built a foundation, right? If you're living together, if you are in a certain, like confined type of relationship where like marriage, but not you moving towards that, then your stability depends on that relationship because of what you agreed to. That definitely can be, again, something that leads you to respond in crisis because of your emotional response and uncertainty about the situation going forward.
So you wouldn't say automatically the man is a wimp if he starts crying because his girlfriend leaving.
I think that that's judgmental and unfair to say. You don't know what someone's experience is. You don't know what their history of abandonment was. So I don't know if like a crisis situation is different than having your own crisis in, relationships or whatever else. Those are two different things in my perspective. I wouldn't identify that as a crisis, but the response, again, I said it every time, the response does. So if you respond at a crisis, we usually are not thinking before we do things. We don't communicate with other people. We just kind of try to do something to resolve the issue quickly. And then that in turn ends up being a crisis situation.
I would say young men and some older men, they don't have necessarily good skills and be able to adapt to situations. So I would say with 25%, it might be a crisis. But I don't think it should be a crisis if we have gotten matured and developed ourselves in our own maturity. But I've said this before, that I don't know if you remember when I said this on the show, that half of the men that are in prison are because of their situations with their girlfriend, ex. Something happens and they fly out the handle, get all upset and mad, and they do stuff crazy because they don't know how to handle those emotions. And yes, ma'am, go ahead.
I definitely agree with you. I think that that is a response to everyday life difficulties, right? But it's exacerbated because of the lack of emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is what you were referring to, but the opposite, emotional unintelligence. So when you're not able to understand what somebody else by their body language is maybe feeling, and then how to adjust your behavior according to that, that's a lack of emotional intelligence. If you don't know that you can identify what you're feeling, you don't know what emotion you're feeling, and it automatically, because anger is a secondary emotion. So if it automatically turns to anger, then you're not emotionally intelligent enough to recognize that you may be hurt, and in turn, it is anger, right? And then that's when people react. Anything with "re" in the front, it's not a positive thing. Why? Because you're repeating it.
Anything with "re" on the front of it.
Re.
All right, R-E.
Re. React.
Yeah. I would say that is a big issue with young men because their hormones overwhelm their just their whole character and the whole being. And if they don't have practice and understanding of how to calm themselves and maintain themselves, they could do crazy things. And I go back to what I was saying about half the gentlemen that are in jail are there because they were trying to impress a girl, so they did something. You go back to the shooting of one of the presidents. It was because the guy was trying to impress a girl. And guys are crazy like that because we don't
acknowledge your emotions.
Understand. Say again.
Oh, I love that you use that word. Don't worry about me. Keep going. I love this.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very prominent thing to talk about, but at the same time, you don't want to mollify the young man and all of his spirit and emotions because you don't want to mute that. But that's where I believe a father comes in. I give the example that I was teaching and they told two kids that if you pass this test, you ain't got to take any more and you graduate. The girl said, "Give me the test." And I take it. The boy said, "Why? Why do I have to do that?" what is the purpose of it? And I give another example. The boy, you tell him to go across the street and just go across the street now. He might ask you, why? What's on the other side of the street? While at a young age, he might just six or under, he might just go across the street. But that's where a father comes in, because at a certain age, the boy may want to have all the answers, have all the understanding, and you might not have time to give him all that at that time. But you got to tell him, go across the street or I'm going to put a belt on you.
You got to tell him to do that?
It's according to your relationship. But you might have to tell him to do that. Now, if you got time to talk to him, yes. If you got time to talk to him, yes, you want to do that. But sometimes you may not have time. But even if you have to do that, you have to come back later and share with him, because that's still more important than putting that belt on him, because you got to get him to understand there's a reason why. Now, that ain't in every situation, but I'm sharing that it's very important to get that discipline and behavior together, along with sharing, the counsel and what is important and so forth. Because as a teacher, you cannot do nothing if you don't have discipline.
Oh, I agree.
You really can't. You really can't do nothing. If everybody's cutting up and talking and throwing stuff into your classroom, it doesn't matter what you're trying to teach.
Nobody can learn.
Yeah, so you have to establish that amount of discipline before you can have real teachers. So that's the point I'm trying to make.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I think that is a great conversation to have later in this show, is to talk about the importance of making a safe space for men to be able to express emotion and help support them with feeling comfortable with learning about them instead of stuffing them, because that doesn't do anything.
The only thing I'll say is, because of those hormones and all of that comes with it, he might not be able to sit down for a second and be able to hear what you're saying.
I think
that's a problem.
I don't think it's just hormones. It also is a willingness. Willingness versus willfulness. Willingness is, you know that something's not working, and you're willing to try the different things to find what does. Willfulness is that you recognize that it's not working, but you're not willing to do the work to make changes to make it work. And I think
I've seen that a lot. The biggest thing I see is young men have a problem with somebody telling them what to do. But that's life. Any place you're going to have a job, you're going to ask for, counsel or anything, somebody going to tell you what to do. And if you're not capable of dealing with that, you're going to have a real difficulty all the time. But before we get any further, I would like to ask you an example of 3 crisis situations, and then we'll come back with how can you deal with them. What are 3 crisis situations that you have encountered?
So let me give you a definition of what really is, okay? A crisis is any situation that unexpected events happen that usually are beyond the individual's control. Example, now these are the examples. Oh, the hurricane that just came through Barrow. That's a crisis. It's a natural, weather crisis, but it's a crisis. Why? We had no control over what was going to happen if we had power, all these other things. So Houston is still in a state of crisis and recovery because of unexpected events, right? Now,
that's a big one.
I mean, it just happened. I mean, we're still dealing with it. I was just telling my daughter earlier, I think we were walking a dog, and I was looking around the neighborhood, and fences are still down. There's still like trash, like the debris all still piled up, and it's so hot that it turned brown and it's withering. Like all of this stuff going on around us, and we're trying to adjust to get back to normal life. Even that,
as well as it was an emergency in the context that without power, it was seriously dangerous.
it
I
was.
My mama's power went out. She's 95. And
Oh
how
my
many people did we see,
Paris.
their elderly parents pass? And
Yep,
so I had to move her in with me.
I
And,
understand.
for 5 days, my brother and sister didn't have any power. I was the only one in the family to have power. So I moved her in with me. And yeah, that was a crisis because there was several elderly people that passed during that time.
Yeah, this has been very horrific for all the members of our community because I mean we understand that it was a storm. That was the crisis initially, right? So like, the actual, damage of the winds and things like that, right? But as Houston, we're used to that. But not in being it being July and 90 some degrees outside, and we don't, and then the light people are telling us that they don't know when we're gonna have lights back. It's very much so stressful, overwhelming, and life threatening. And
Yes.
with all of those things, that is the prime example of a crisis situation. There is no.
And how would you have counseled somebody to deal with that? If they had the ability, get a hotel room. I mean, I would assume, but
Well, I mean, in that, the after effects are usually the case, right? Like that's what is someone is being supported through therapy to learn about or to understand how to, address. So it will be after. It won't be in it because I'm gonna tell you the truth. In that time, I didn't have the mental capacity to help nobody. I was going through it with everybody else without power and, trying to figure out how we're going to move forward. And I did count my blessings, but I also had to acknowledge because we had power after 3 days. But, like I still have to acknowledge the impact and the toll that it takes on me mentally, physically, and emotionally before I can help anybody else.
yes. So
Now,
like they say on a plane, put your mask on before you help somebody else.
you're
Very
so right.
powerful thing to always remember.
It's
Are there any other examples of crisis situation? How about some dealing with uh, family relationships? What about if uh, your son comes and he comes in, you let him in, but now he doesn't want to do nothing but play video games. And if you say anything to him, he gets aggressive.
I don't think that that's an unexpected event though, because your son, right? It's not
Yeah.
unexpected. It could be stressful. It could be financially straining, all those things, but that's not necessarily a crisis.
It's not a crisis because you let him in the door and you already
No,
knew the
it's
possibility. Huh?
it's expected. You know your child, right? You know your
Right.
child behaviors. You know that they might have at some point. You know that your child might, have some anger issues or whatever else. You know your child if you live with them, and you know him when you gave birth to him. So that wouldn't be unexpected, right? Now, if
Okay.
an example of that and how that would be a crisis. So you know how people are using drugs more frequently nowadays, especially of that age, teenagers, young adults, and they go try a drug, and it causes them some, you know, response, psychological response, behavioral response because they use that drug, and their loved ones witness it. That would be a crisis, right? Because that's not normally typically, their typical behavior. They had a different type of response because they used a drug that they hadn't used before. And, you're trying to help them through that crisis. And then also you're in the crisis. So the parents or whoever else in the family that's witnessing it is also going through a crisis in that time.
I think I would say at least 50% of crises have to deal with family. We don't get a Hurricane Barrel very much, but we always have family we got to deal with. And everybody is not going to be, just united and everybody working together. You're always going to have some outlier in the family. It doesn't have to be all the time, but I think that's what crisis most people deal with in some kind of way. And for some people, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a husband leaving, that can be a crisis, especially if you're not prepared. Your children could bring you crisis and so forth.
Yep.
You know, in my situation, my daughters have boyfriends, and boyfriend hitting upon my daughter, that's a crisis.
It is. Yep.
Yeah, that's a crisis. That's an unexpected thing.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, what am I going to do? Am I going to go over there with a gun and am I going to make that worse? Or am I going to try to talk to him? Or am I just going to go get my daughter and say, no, come on, and just leave him be, and we'll call the police to get him out of your apartment?
That's a perfect example of a crisis within the family, for sure. That's exactly what it is.
And I'm sure most people out here in the audience, and if you are on Facebook and you have a question or a comment, please chime in, and we'll take a look at that, and we'll try to share it. But those are the type of crises that most people encounter, different things like that.
Yeah.
And like I was saying, there's multiple ways to deal with it, but if you don't have the emotional intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
you might fly off the handle with your first emotion, and
Yes.
that can make the things worse. Go ahead.
Or support. Like anytime that I am distressed or overwhelmed, and because our emotional intelligence and our capacity it varies based on situations, right? Because I know one time I went to Walgreens. I don't know if I told you this a while ago, but I went to Walgreens. There was like I can't say if it's a robbery. I don't know the actual term, but a guy jumped in over. Me and my daughter were there. Jumped in over the register area and started stealing cigarettes. The person that was checking out panicked. I have a license to carry, so I'm trying to respond to that, protect my daughter and all these other things. And the guy had to be on drugs or something, left the store, and everybody was fine. But I've learned in my fight, flight, freeze response is I want to be a security guard, a protector. I don't know, but my emotional intelligence wasn't there because I was trying to respond to the threat. And so my body's response was, okay, well, let's go out here and protect everybody else, make sure everybody else is safe, may help this lady with the panic attack. And then I suffered, honestly, because I thought, oh, everybody's safe. I did what I was supposed to do, all this stuff after it was over, that I didn't pay attention to what my body, was going through and stressed about. It took me about 2 weeks to get back to my normal mental state after the crisis, because our heart rate increases, our body responds to threats. And when it does, it takes its toll on it. And we have to be mindful and aware to be able to manage it.
In that situation, that was a immediate situation that you had to deal with.
Unexpected.
And whatever training and thought process that got you to that point, that's what you come up with. However, in the situation I was talking about, I'm talking about I have time to think, and I found this guy has done something to my daughter, and I got time to think as I'm driving over there.
Okay.
So you didn't have time to think, really. You just had to react to it at that particular time.
But after is what I was referring to, not the actual situation. So after, I thought what I expected myself to do. I expected myself as a therapist to be able to help anybody in there with emotional difficulties, right? I expected myself to be grateful because we were safe. And then after that, I failed to take care of myself because I still was responding like it was a threat, because my body and my mind and my experience taught me that it was not safe to go in the Walgreens because you don't know what'll be happening. And then I also learned that I need to open my gun case before I go places. But still, I learned different things, but I didn't take care of my mental state. Like I drink tea every day. I make sure I take bubble baths or self-care stuff. I wasn't doing that after that for 2 weeks. And I didn't realize it until my body responded to it. And so I couldn't make decisions to take care of myself.
So you're saying you should have been able to calm down, drink your tea, give yourself the bubble baths, meditation to help yourself get through that. And you weren't able to do it because it was still in your spirit.
Yeah, and that's, human nature, right? I know all these things up here, but my body is going to respond to the things, and I'm going to have my interpretation of it going forward. That is a schema that I have now about going to Walgreens or going to certain stores. I need to make sure that, because I expect certain things. So the issue was my expectation. And the expectation that I set for myself. I'm supposed to do this as a therapist. I'm supposed to do this as a mother. And no, after that was over with, I was supposed to be mindful that I went through a traumatic event, and I need to make sure that I'm more intentional with caring for myself and taking a break instead of trying to do everything at once to not feel what I was feeling, because that's what I did.
So you would share with anybody that you need to have, when you go through a trauma incident, different things to help yourself kind of get back into whatever it is for them that they do to help themselves. Some people walk, some people listen to music, different things different people do, but you should be intentional to try to help yourself recover from trauma, because we all go through traumas, different things. And if you can do those things, you can help yourself get back to normal maybe a little bit quicker than you would otherwise.
I think the key in all of that is just give yourself grace. Acknowledge that you've been through something traumatic. So not like, even like with Beryl and this whole situation and the people that were out of power for more than a day, we suffered, right? So we can't expect when the power back on to go and just do everything like nothing happened. That's not realistic, right? We have to give our bodies the nourishment it needs. And that could be, just making sure we're eating as well as we can, sleeping, and doing the things that help us, allow us, our bodies, to take care of our bodies. Drinking enough water, those types of things. That's the minimal that we can do. But give yourself grace.
The situation with Beryl was, that was an unforeseen crisis trauma. It's nothing like not having power in the middle of July. And the first night I stayed with my mama at her house, it was unbearable. It was unbearable for me. And my mama's 95. I'm just glad she survived that night, and I was able to take her to my house the next day. But I can imagine what some people went through. I think between the trees falling on people and the heat and different things, there's 21 people that passed. And that's quite a bit for any storm. And that was a crisis. Like we've had hurricanes before. But
it was a crisis. But this one was a different kind. But it's all going to impact us in the way that we see and we respond when there's another storm, because we live in the area that hurricanes come. We live there, so we have to learn how to acknowledge our experiences, give ourselves grace in that, not expect to respond a certain way just because that's what I was referring to in regards to you and the daughter calling, right, and saying that her partner is hitting her or whatever else. You have an expectation as a father that you got to save her, right? And that expectation will lead to you making bad decisions and not using your emotional intelligence in that. Recognizing that you have a right to feel. It's valid to feel angry, confused, worried, all those things. But what we do, it's really not necessarily based on expectation. It's based on what you know is right and what will keep your child safe.
Yeah.
expectations distort our perception of how to respond in situations, and that's a problem.
We are toward the end of our program. We've had some very good conversations. What are some things down the line we could talk about in mental health? What do you see are some of the bigger issues that people deal with besides crisis and trauma? What are some of the topics that we could talk about in the future?
I think that it's important to talk about having how to communicate. Communication is imperative because communication is an aspect of our mental health or unhealth. When we feel depressed, we withdraw. We don't communicate with others, right? We don't, we feel ashamed in a lot of ways. We keep information in that we're nervous about that people won't accept. And I think that if we learn how to advocate for ourselves and communicate, we're able to get the support we need and manage our mental health as well.
I can see people saying, if you want to talk, you can talk and you can share. But I totally understand what you're saying. There's times when you're scared to say something because it may cause a controversy, but it needs to be said so that you could have a clarity of communication. But and there's other times where, you know, as a man, your friend or your partner, they expect you to already know what they're thinking, and that may not always be the case. Now, if you're with somebody long enough, you kind of know where their mind is, but you can't depend on that either.
I don't support that at all. I know you know certain people's behavior, right? But you don't know what somebody's thinking. Nobody ever knows that. Unless they say it out loud. And realistically, we're as humans, we have intrusive thoughts. We have just other things that, like, we could be sitting in front of you and we could have a conversation right now, back and forth, but you could be thinking about something else completely different in your head. So no, that's not fair.
The human mind is something else, isn't it? It is. You cannot just think you know what somebody is thinking or where they're coming from. It's so many different aspects and variables. I encounter that all the time. I'll be sitting in front of somebody and say, you think you somebody or this, that, and I have, it's totally different from what I was thinking. You know, I've encountered that before. I mean, I'll tell you a story another time, but people have wanted to attack me or be confrontational with me, and I haven't said nothing. I haven't said nothing, but they assume that I'm thinking this or that, and they're ready to have a controversy with me. And I'm saying, well, but that's an aside.
I think that's
Say again?
That's another topic to talk about in regards to mental health. Assumptions and judgment.
We all do that.
Yes,
we all do that, but I guess we got to learn how to do it with more precision and fairness. Fairness. I had my neighbor, he said, I know you better than yourself. Now, for somebody to say that and really believe it and, try to implement it, that just shows that person's level, because you really can't know nobody better than that person knows themselves, period. But, usually when somebody's doing that, they're trying to use a slant or an angle and trying to manipulate and do something like that. But communication has so many different parts of it. Me, I'm a writer. I have found that in certain situations, writing a little note can be more impactful than just trying to say it to the person.
You can communicate
to the person also.
Oh, you can communicate it more clearly if you're writing it, right? Because you have time to think. When we're speaking to other humans, we're trying to think about what we want to say, how we want to say it, what they gonna think when we say it, and then we're not able to actually effectively communicate what we transparently want, feel, whatever else. Especially if you don't feel safe with that person. Either you feel, and I mean safe like they might be judging you, or
Go ahead.
No,
Uh, so communication of the different aspects of communication in relationships or in life, what would be probably the best way to look at that?
in regards to, oh no, can you?
Communication, what we're talking about as far as having a show, and we're trying to,
Oh, okay.
yeah, we're trying to share with people the different aspects of communication and how you can be effective or not effective.
I think that or ineffective. I think I support that. What you just said.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds
Or how
good.
communication impacts your mental health and functioning relationships, whatever else too.
I'm gonna write that down. That's our next show. That's our
I,
next show. Can you give a final comment on crisis situations for people out there who have dealt with and are dealing with crisis situations? What are some of the best ways that, of course, it has to be a specific situation, but what are some of the crisis situations that you have seen, and what are some of the best ways? In other words, give your final statement on crisis situation and how they may can get through it. I know that's a lot, and I went around the bend, and I was trying to catch myself and correct myself, but I kept getting messed up.
That's all right, because just knew it was a lot of stuff, and I can sum it up. Because I know what we've been talking about crisis, but we also been talking about our personal crises that we all experienced in the Houston area, right? All of these things, and it just really begins with making sure you're not prideful first, or expecting yourself to respond in a certain way when it is an unexpected event and or crisis. So I think the basis of that is allowing yourself to receive the help if it's available, and then giving it to you, take it. Why? Because it is a crisis. It's an unexpected event. It impacts you. No matter what you think you prepared or what you think you should do, it impacts your functioning. It impacts how your body responds. It impacts everything. So it's important to allow people to help, allow that, but also it's important to be intentional with how you're spending your time.
I would say that there are quite a few people that have a problem allowing themselves to be helped.
I know.
There's some people that have a problem being vulnerable. We talked about earlier before the show, I reached out and apologized because I understand a little bit better now, and I'm not have no problem. Hey, I was wrong. This is why I was wrong, and can we try again? And some people have a problem being able to do that, and that is one thing. You have to be, I would say, be vulnerable but still firm at the same time. So we all go through crisis situations. We all go through, that's a part of life, and nobody's perfect. And how we adjust and how we deal with it, that defines who we become and who we are.
You are so right. You are so very right.
Yes, ma'am. Any last statement on that before we go?
Yeah, I want to talk about so I specified what a crisis situation was, right?
Yes.
Unexpected events. But the psychological definition of a crisis is a situation that causes significant emotional and cognitive biases. And
can you go into what those mean a little bit? You said significant, cognitive, cultural,
emotional, and cognitive biases. So emotional bias would be, you like an expectation about how you respond to an emotion, or you shouldn't feel a certain way, or you should or shouldn't respond a certain way to an emotion. So like an example would be if your boyfriend, like you talked about earlier, a boyfriend, girlfriend break up with him, and then he overreacts and does something harmful to somebody. That is what that is, an emotional bias, right? And cognitive bias is that's your thoughts. So cognitions, anything referring to that word, cognitions is your brain, your thoughts. And it impacts your thoughts in those situations that arise that are traumatic in some way or.
So what you're talking about is the cognitive issues that you have cause you to have depression or cause you to have some type of psychological trauma within yourself. Like you mentioned, the possible robbery that you was upset about, and it caused you to fall off of your normal routine for 2 weeks.
Yeah, exactly that. That
Okay.
is exactly what I'm referring to. So yeah, it was a crisis situation that I endured, but it also led to cognitive biases. I'm thinking I'm gonna save people like I'm a security guard. And then I didn't take care of myself after that because I felt like I should be okay because we all, were safe and it didn't nobody was harmed in that. Right? That is distorted in my thinking, but that was my body's stress response, protecting. And that's what our bodies do. I can't expect my body to not do it, but I can give my body the space it needs to recover from it. And that's what I didn't do. And that's what people, I think right now, are not acknowledging and are doing after Pharaoh. Trying to get back to normal so quickly, but not acknowledging what you went through and get extra care of yourself, physically, mentally, and emotionally, to move through that and recover. Crisis.
Yeah, it's kind of a unique situation. It's kind of hard to know what to do. I was without my internet, as well as, of course, I couldn't watch Netflix or any of those.
Me too.
That was kind of rough right there. For some people, it'd be a crisis. I mean,
but I know my phone crisis. My cell phone didn't work at all. And I didn't have any, we don't have house phones anymore. So I couldn't call people. I couldn't do anything because the towers were affected by it. So I couldn't do anything. And that felt like a crisis, but I know that I couldn't control much and I had to accept it. But I also had to make sure that I wasn't rushing trying to get back to normal. That's the thing. Like, I know that takes a different level of energy to adjust to and adapt to crisis. So it's going to take a lot more to recover. And we have to give ourselves some grace instead of just trying to get back to it so quickly, because then that'll cause us to be in a long-term crisis.
Yeah.
Emotionally, psychologically, all of that, right? And that's what's to address.
Well, we've talked about crisis, and we've looked at different crisis, things that have happened, things have happened to us, as well as we shared some perspective with the audience out there about, we know you have dealt with Beryl and it's different things and different ways you could react, but the main thing is try to stay calm and know that if you can stay calm, this too will pass. Don't panic, and just try to keep your sanity and move forward. Last statement before we go?
Yeah, just be sure to take care of yourself, give yourself grace, and stop expecting yourself to be a superhero in traumatic situations. We all got to learn how to do that. And if we learn how to do that and we notice when certain things or, we need certain things and we ask for help, we'll be able to get through the things a lot easier. I think that's the most important thing that was communicated today, just because I know it. Because I'm a therapist, I know what works, just based on what I've read or experienced, all of those other things doesn't mean that my body's response and my expectations didn't make me choose something different. But I definitely learned from it. And that's what I learned. And then also that's important too, learning from our experiences, right? Not just wishing they didn't happen or getting angry or upset or whatever else, or victimizing ourselves. It's really important to notice what works, what doesn't, learn from it. So the next time you experience anything that's like it, you know what works for you, or you have options, right? Because you learned something.
Life is about learning and growing from each experience. I do know that.
Right.
And it's important to take those lessons and improve every day if possible
You
from
are
those
right.
lessons.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
very much so. I thank you. Everybody, this is Jennifer Cain, therapist with Adorned Counseling, right?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Would you like to share anything else?
Oh, well, I'm a licensed professional counselor, a licensed chemical dependency counselor, a herbalist, and passionate about the work that I'm able to do with the community. And we have BIPOC therapists in my practice. It's not just me, but I know that being your best self starts with not expecting or adhering to the world's expectations, but just making sure that you are your authentic, most genuine self, and you'll be able to get through anything.
Very good advice. Uh, an important question. Because you went to Prairie View, is that why you got the purple hair?
I took 2 classes from Prairie View, so I
Oh, okay. I thought you went to Prairie View.
no, I mean I went there for 2 classes, but that was after I got my master's degree.
Okay. Well,
But
super
pur-
powerful.
purple hair is I've always been since I was a little girl, going to the beat of my own drum. And my favorite color is actually pink, but that wasn't cute. So I I tried it one day, and it's been that way for now 8 years. I was like, oh, it looks like nice on my skin. People compliment me. They told me it means royalty. So I was
It
like, oh,
does.
I
It
didn't know.
does. It does.
I
Going
had
back to the ancient days, it does.
I
Yeah.
had no idea. I was just like, people call me Prince sometimes, and it's just fun. But it's just I've always been colors make me happy. Like it brightens my mood. It changes my energy. So I try to ensure that I do what makes me feel good, and my hair is a part of doing that too. But I'm not changing the purple now since everybody know me by
Yes, ma'am.
it.
That's a very important thing. Do what makes you happy, but doesn't cross over into somebody else's safe space.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I had to mention that. You can't just do what makes you happy and interrupt everybody else.
Right.
You still got to have
Yeah.
value and discipline because you work in a world where other people are also. But at the
Yeah,
same time, enjoy yourself.
I
Enjoy
agree.
yourself. I thank you, everybody. Thanks, Sister Jennifer, uh, therapist at Adorned Counseling. And we will see you next time where we're talking about communication. And you
Communicate.
heard the title, ma'am?
I love it. I'm excited to talk about it.
Yes. Uh, you got to have effective communication. And throughout life, communication makes things move. They
Yeah.
make things happen.
Yeah.
Written communication, which I'm very much a part of, and verbal communication
Yeah.
and nonverbal communication.
Now, nonverbal communication is behavior, and all behavior is a form of communication.
We will talk about this next time on Minding Our Mental Wellness. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time.